Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode in our Lad Stripping Through Time podcast. By all accounts, the last episode was a great success, so thank you to everybody that watched the first one, liked, and subscribed.
Everyone else, you suck.
I'm joined today by my co-host, Cleveland, and our first guest actually for this podcast series. That'll be Josh / Network Gremlin / I am displeased.
AKA Bad Streamer Boy 2000. Anyways.
Mm-hmm. And a huge thank you to Cleveland for editing the first podcast. It was a really high quality podcast. So thank you, everyone. Big claps to him.
Round of applause.
Woohoo. Round of applause. Clap sync, because we were struggling with that in the beginning. Alright, so the first episode dealt with the first stage of human development, and that was fire. This episode today is going to focus on agriculture, and when we discovered that when you put a plant in the ground, it will grow and make more plants through fruit and seeds. So that's fun. That's
Shocking
an interesting
discovery.
Shocking discovery. Hey, it took us millions of years to do it.
Yeah.
8 million years. So
Yeah.
Took quite a hot minute, I mean, you would think that sticking a seed in the ground would do something, but apparently we're not very smart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's amazing to think actually how quickly we've like in the span of us developing technology, it just went straight up, and that's due to agriculture being a major factor of that actually.
yeah, as I said in the previous episode, 2 million years from discovering fire, we go on the moon, so it's not too bad.
Yeah.
We did better than the erect ones. Joke from last video, stolen. You can't judge me on that one.
Yeah. Well, the erect ones discovered fire.
Shut up.
Well, I mean, yeah. No, but
Yeah.
So where would we like to start, Mr. Co-host and
Alright.
host?
Alright. Let's start with what were we just before we discovered agriculture? Well, obviously we were
Pitiful
hunter-gatherers who... that too, but we were hunter-gatherers who foraged nuts, berries, seeds, fruits, other plants, and also sometimes hunted deer and mammoth or whatever. However, the most common meat that we actually hunted was, fishing, because, fish are less likely to run very far and attempt to eat you. So
Safer option, yeah.
and it's the safer option, and it's the most energy rewarding as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what we were before. The Ice Age ended, and the world became warmer, plenty more plants around, plenty more animals. The ground became fertile. In the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia, modern-day Syria, Iraq.
Yeah, I had a photo in that last episode, so for all of you who don't know, you should probably go watch the last episode.
Link in bio. Link in bio.
Yeah, so in this area, the Fertile Crescent, it practically was rife with barley and wheat, the first cereal crops, and people were just going about their day picking that. And then someone discovered if we put these in rows, these seed things, we can make more
They
of
do.
them.
Yeah.
It does crap, and it replicates itself.
Am I going to have to bleep out Deece's first swear word? On my word.
Yeah.
How long did that
Yeah.
beeping take, by the way? Going like beep, beep, beep. It's just
It took me about four hours just to go through the entire thing again to fix all the audio. And the bleeping itself took about an hour and a half. Just finding the Minecraft noises that weren't royalty, that were royalty free, took me about an hour.
Yeah.
would. Yeah.
And so
Anyways,
he's
back on
just
topic.
bleeping out the swear words, and that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Stop! Stop!
So it begins.
You bastard.
You just. Wait, doesn't
Okay, I'm not bleeping out bastard. I'm bleeping out. That's it.
just beep,
You're,
beep.
you're bleeping out what and what.
Shut
You'll
up.
never
Okay,
know.
back to
Okay,
agriculture.
yeah,
That's
anyway.
enough.
Back to agriculture. it's a serious topic. So hunter-gatherers were typically, compared to the first agriculturists, a lot more physically fit and had a very high memory span due to the complex map of their surroundings that they memorized. And they had stronger bones and teeth because they were constantly exercising everything. And agriculturalists, well, you grow your crops and you work on the fields, but you have a bit more time to sit around and just be lazy and not work out. So naturally, you're a little bit more unhealthy in that regard.
Well, that was obvious. Well, that was after they had completely transferred to more like what's it said? It's something. I always mess up that word. It's where people are grouped together. You know, you stay in one area. It's
Settlement?
No,
Oh.
no. I'll tell you right now. It is sedentism.
Oh,
Sedentary.
yeah.
So
If you're sedentary, you stay in one place,
Yes.
yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did at one point hybrid between the two before they could, properly take full advantage of, the crops. So they would have like a hybrid of, you'd have the crops in the growing at some point, and while they were growing, you'd hunt and acquire meat, and then you'd go, and then once you're
Suck a cow teddy every now and then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, man.
Yeah. Because at first there was just so much barley, like, oh god, there was so much
Yeah,
barley
in
just
Mesopotamia,
growing around.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to plant and plow really, they would just go out, leave their village and just gather it and come back. But then,
After
the
time.
more
Yeah.
after time when there's more people, it doesn't start to, the threshold is reached, so you start planting more, obviously, yourself. So essentially there was like a lot of barley and wheat just growing around in the Fertile Crescent, and was abundant enough that you didn't have to grow it yourself. You'll just leave your village, gather it, come back. But once the threshold was reached due to a higher population growth, naturally you start to plant more yourself.
Yes, it would
Yeah.
be like it would start running out, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes,
If
yeah.
there's potential for that, more people, then there'll
Yes.
definitely be more people, and then eventually you'll get to the point where you aren't sustaining the current population, so they start to die out. And because humans aren't animals, well, we are animals, but we aren't, that type of animal.
Animal.
We're
We,
sentient.
Yeah, we're sent. Well, yeah, then
I mean-
we come up with solutions so that the population can keep growing instead of staying stagnant for millions of years.
Okay, we have a smart brain. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, pretty.
Well, some of us.
Some of
some
us.
of us.
And well, we're not the only ones with big brain. Neanderthal and Erectus also did have
Yes,
big brain.
yes.
Because humans essentially stood up on two legs and were like, hell yeah, it's big brain time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just like happened no, obviously it didn't, but like.
No, I think it was I personally think it's like everything else, where it was just a completely random gene mutation in, reproductive organ, or not organ, cells.
Now, you don't need to edit this out, but you see, evolution kind of just screwed women over. Because when we stood up on 2 feet, and our brains literally got bigger and our heads got bigger, because, they are standing up now, women's hip sizes became smaller compared to other apes and things like that, while our head size was getting bigger at the same time. So
Lol.
it became very difficult to start having children. So,
Oh.
yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's why there's so many C-sections and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's why you see all
Shout
those
out to
procedures.
women.
Yeah, represent, yo.
Hashtag Feminagrug.
Anyways, yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, so getting back to, so there was obviously the Fertile Crescent, and
Mm-hmm.
also around that time, they were starting to domesticate animals also, and
Yeah.
Yes.
you'd find that actually animals, especially cattle and ox and all that, became incredibly useful, and like tenfold the amount of plowing you could get done.
Yeah, so
Transferring from having to do it by hand to being able to, not with a plow, but the plow was developed later on.
Yeah.
so
It made
yeah,
it a lot
if
easier.
essentially if you're not doing the plowing, you can get an animal to do it for you. You're making energy a lot better. And speaking of energy, before agriculture, it took 1,000 calories a day to make 1,000 calories because you were spending your whole entire day hunting and foraging.
Yeah.
Agriculture, you are making an excess of calories
Exactly.
in excess. So foraging and hunting essentially just requires absolute, contribution and skill, the same skills from everybody. Whilst
Complete commitment.
with agriculture, you can specialize. You start getting people making art, people craftsmanship. You get all these nice little specializations that we take for granted today, like computers, for instance.
Essentially, the agriculture led completely to like what we have today. Like, if we at the moment as we are now, we are heavily reliant on agriculture. Obviously, I mean, our population can't just rely on hunter gathering. I think that would be practically impossible. But the reason why we got to one of the greatest reasons why in my opinion, but like from what I've seen, is that one of the greatest reasons why Africa was so underdeveloped compared to in colonial times, and also one of the greatest reasons why we are so developed at the moment, is because of agriculture. Because European and obviously Middle Eastern, even Asian places, they got access to a lot of they could domesticate crops and animals a lot quicker than people in Africa. So like, for example, as you know, in the Fertile Crescent there was that big abundance of wheat and barley,
and also domesticatable animals.
Exactly. There was rice in Asia, and the first cattle that were domesticated was in the Middle East. It was 10,500 before Christ, and Chinese was 10,600
BCE,
so,
guys.
The thing is, they couldn't transfer that knowledge pretty much over to Africa because of the Saharan desert, so
when it comes to Africa, there was naturally not that many domesticatable animals, such as there weren't that many cows and other domesticatable animals, so the transition to agriculture is harder. And there is you can forage as in Africa, but it's difficult. It's hard. It's hot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why, and a lot of the animals are pretty harsh as well, such as lions and scorpions and things like that. It's a harsh environment to live in. That's why their population wasn't that high.
One of I actually agree with that completely, because that's what one of my points. Well, anyways, one of the things is that one of the biggest things that there's a guy his name's Jared Diamond. You guys any know of him?
I've heard of him.
Yes.
No, I haven't.
He's released multiple books. One of his most acclaimed books is Guns, Germs, and Steel, and that describes basically in essence why Africa advanced so much slower than Europe and Middle East and Asia. And that was one of the reasons was continental axes, which I won't get into because that's geographical. But another one was that the amount of the domesticated animals and crops in Africa is significantly less than Middle East and Asia. And obviously the Middle East, branched off into Europe. That's how Europe got a lot of the wheat and barley from trade with the Middle East because of the continental axes. But there was just sorghum in Africa, and that need like you said, the amount of domesticated animals, there were barely any. I think there was maybe one. The only way that they acquired domesticated animals was via trade with Middle East. There are things like traces in only 6,500 BC where they actually found traces of there being domesticated cattle, which is so much later, 4,000 years.
Yeah, Guns, Germs, and Seal is practically one of the biggest anthropological books to read out there.
Definitely.
I'm busy reading a book on Audible. Well, not reading, listening to a book on Audible. Called *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind* by Dr. Yuval Noah Harari. It's a pretty good book as well.
Yes.
Kind of the inspiration for this podcast idea that I've had. Yeah, it's a really good book. Yeah, so we're not sponsored though by either of those books or authors or Audible, so we should probably disclaim that.
It was at this point where Cleveland's alarm went off, so here is a transition to the next topic.
Both the horse and camel went extinct naturally in North and South America.
Yes.
Horse was reintroduced through the Europeans, however.
Exactly, yeah. But the horse was a lot later in the journey, if you know what I mean. It wasn't early on. It was, I don't know the exact thing, but I remember seeing a chart where horses like all the way down in terms of domesticated animals.
We'll talk about horse domestication in the next episode in the Bronze Age, because that's a big topic.
That would be very, okay, well, I think one of the, also getting back to actual agriculture, is that the, sedentism is honestly, I'm just gonna say the definition, just like it's like the practice of living in one place for a long time. The ability to do so was because of agriculture and the ability to grow crops, and that led the way for so many advancements in humankind, like it.
Hentai.
No, I think that was the nuclear bomb. I think you mentioned that.
Oh yeah, but like it led to larger populations. It was transformed. Like there was a lot more time into developing things instead of, as you said, spending time in hunting and
specialization.
gathering. Yes, yeah. So you could definitely experiment more and spend less time hunting a bird that's been flying away from you for the past 2 days.
It does have its downsides.
Sorry, I'm getting serious. What's it called? The Crude family? What's that movie again? Yeah,
that
I'm
one,
getting those vibes again.
One advanced human, all these idiots busy hunting out here, like, holy hell, dude.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and we can specialize, but it does have its downsides. There's a reason why some people didn't want to immediately switch to agriculturalism.
Really? Why is that? Due to raiding, etc.?
No. Because when you switch to agriculturalism, you don't get as much exercise as you do when you're.
Yeah.
So you look weaker physically because, I mean, sure, it's still hard work to get agriculture, and by today's standards, agriculturists would have probably
But it's
been
not nearly as hard as hunting.
not nearly as hard as being a hunter-gatherer. So
Yeah.
people started archaeologists have started seeing that the early agriculturalists compared to hunter-gatherers' bones at the time. There's a lot more degradation and fracturing, and another big downside for your health when you switch to agriculture, communicable disease between animals like chickenpox and smallpox start to work their way into your society. And there's also this one disease that's got to do with wool from sheep as well. Yeah. So
I actually think a lot of modern diseases that are very common in poorer areas, very rural areas, are a direct result of us switching to agriculturalism.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty
no,
much.
definitely.
I don't know.
I mean, you're definitely right in saying that, because as people became more in one place, trade routes began to develop. Like, essentially, it wouldn't be before you'd be like, yeah, we remember seeing them by the big rock that looks like Muhammad or something like that. I don't know, like, it would.
That's
yeah.
like.
Oh no, the name would be like
That's
Uga,
very
Uga
far.
or something like that. Yeah, it would be like a weird grunting sound for your name. I don't know. But it would be from like a landmark. It would change to like they would be known to be in this exact location, and that led to like the the Silk Route, the silk, and then
Silk Road,
spice.
yeah.
Silk Road hasn't been invented yet.
No, I know, but I'm
No,
saying
it's
it
been
would
a
have
while.
led to that via the trade
Yeah.
and the increase of people staying in one spot. All because of
Yeah.
agriculture, it's a cascade effect.
Agriculture allows trade and also war, because if you're growing crops better, someone's gonna get jealous.
Oh, yeah.
Or it's more like if you have the fields or the fertile land to grow more, then someone's going to want that fertile.
But that was
land,
happening already with tribes, like the war.
I don't know. I think hunting grounds.
Exactly.
It was similar. It was the similar kind of thing, but it wasn't the same.
And it was nowhere near as deadly. Like maybe one guy got hit over the head with a club and collapsed. But here it's like organized, settlements actively attacking each other, which leads.
Real war. Yeah.
The first concept of war, early defense systems start coming into place.
Yeah, that's true. There
You
still
start
would have
seeing
been
the
conflict.
dugouts.
It's just it would have started to increase, definitely. I think
Yeah.
but it's amazing though to think how agriculture is such a pivotal point in. I don't know what are the what was the first revolution? Is that bronze?
Cognitive revolution,
Okay,
actually.
and the second one?
Probably the agricultural revolution. And then there was the scientific revolution in the 1500s, where we developed the scientific theory, and we started questioning the world around us and discovering things. Then it was the industrial revolution, 300 years after that
But
one.
Notice how far apart these are, but also notice how
It gets
more
closer.
frequent they happen. Yeah, and I think that is directly proportional to population size.
Yes, no,
Population
for sure.
size, and also the widespread use of information. We're in the information age right now, and I think we're going through a little revolution ourselves that people will talk about later on. Because you have the world's knowledge at your fingertips. With a quick Google search, you can find out many things that people would have died to know.
Yes, yeah.
Like 300,
Actually
400 years
died.
ago.
He's
Yeah.
No,
Hello,
literally,
Galileo Galilei.
I mean, yeah.
Anyway, we're getting sidetracked, I think.
Yeah,
A little.
getting back
fine,
to agriculture. Yeah.
We are all about getting sidetracked. Just
Yeah,
watch the
we're
last
all about it.
episode.
We're all about that sidetracking. What else? There was another thing. So let's talk about the differences between wild and domesticated varieties of plants, because that's interesting. Okay, so wild wheat. Okay, I'll send the picture to you guys so you can edit it in later. But wild wheat is it's very small, thin, strainy, grows almost anywhere, whilst domesticated varieties absolutely get chosen through, because we choose the better plants to regrow. So through that process of evolution that we managed to, take hold of, we just made the edible bits bigger and more numerous, which can have the downside of it requires more energy and more fertilization and water and care to grow. So we're putting more energy in to our plants, and the energy is putting more energy out, which allows us to, obviously have food surpluses and things like that.
Yes, a high carbohydrate, like carrots or whatever, I don't know. But, no, yeah, I mean, just getting back to just the domestication of crops meant you'd, just to clarify, I'm sure we all here know, but just discuss it as, you choose your best, your best plant. You choose the plant that's I don't want to say plumpest, but that does the best in that
Plumpest
climate.
plant,
Yeah.
You want those cucumbers with the most girth, dude.
You want the one that grows the most in that particular environment,
Yes.
because then you obviously get a higher yield.
To sidetrack from that, that's also I don't know whether this will be a major, but that's one of also a big reason why there were the transition from Middle East to Africa is that the climate of that fertile crescent, that's all along I don't want to say the same climate, but the whole of Eurasia, east. You know, all that is on that continental axis of that climate.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
The
and it
Tigris
would
and
have made
Euphrates rivers, yeah.
the spreading of seeds and like crops and domesticated crops a lot harder in Africa.
Because African soil is very hard to grow things on.
It's a lot
And the
drier,
climate's
yeah.
a lot hotter.
A lot drier and a lot hotter, yeah.
Yes, exactly. You'd have to. It would have taken a much longer time for a strain to be, require less water, would actually, properly fruit or develop in that weather. Just so many factors.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of factors. But the thing is we still managed to, I mean, we still manage even today to grow plants in Africa, but I think that attributes directly to the point that we've gotten a lot better than back then, where we were back then.
No, definitely.
But
Definitely.
yeah,
I mean the contrast from our agriculture at the moment compared, remember they didn't have pesticide. I think I read somewhere that the difference between our modern day crops compared to the old then crops is like the yield is like double the size, like almost triple for some plants. And
today we also have genetically modified
exactly
organisms and things like that.
GMOs.
So,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So we can genetically alter plants now and the DNA within them to just make them bigger.
Yeah,
you didn't
America.
Okay, not just
I
America,
know,
because
but
it happens everywhere. But yeah.
Bigger's better.
No, bigger is better in
Yes,
this case,
no, for
because
sure.
bigger means more population, which means
For those
all
of
the
you,
good things can happen.
there's a Crash Course episode, the first one's about the agricultural revolution, and he made a good point that we live in a society where you can get a burger, for about $1, about 17 rand exchange rate. Anyway, you can get a burger for $1, and on this burger's, bread, which you need to grow wheat for, and then produce flour, and then, yeast, rise, bake the bread. Then you've got, your patty, you need to raise a whole cow, kill that cow.
I don't know about a whole cow. Like, depends where you're going, my guy. If it's $1, I would think McDonald's isn't really gonna put a whole.
It's like 50%
maybe,
horse.
Yeah.
There's like roadkill.
There's
Anyway, there's like
traces.
there's meat. There's meat on there.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have your pickles, which you need to grow, and then
Of
you can
course,
grow
yeah,
cucumbers, and
a
then
lot of
obviously
things.
pickle them. There's like a lot of things, and mustard seeds for the mustard sauce. It's all of these things packed into one package, and it's only costing $1 because of how advanced we have become through agriculture and modernization and things like that.
You also have to wonder if you're paying, $1 for it. That means that it took less than $1 to make it, which then you really start thinking, what is actually in there? Like, then that's now getting, it's getting into artificial foods and artificial. I don't know how to explain it, but whether is that mustard really from a mustard seed? Isn't it like?
Well, probably because
chemicals?
it tastes like mustard.
Well,
There are a few chemicals that enhance.
Oh yeah,
It
and,
tastes like
who
mustard.
has?
They're-
Yeah, it tastes
That's,
like mustard.
Yeah,
It isn't actually
okay. Let me
mustard.
rephrase. It has mustard seed in it,
Who
but
knows?
there's probably a few taste enhancers.
Yeah.
Like
What,
MSG.
it's like 1% mustard
Yeah.
seed now after they put the 200 kilograms in the batch of like three
Yeah,
mustard
just
beans,
add a little
like
bit of.
200 kilograms of
Hey,
soy.
Yeah.
there's
You
mustard
know,
seeds
so-
in it. There's
No.
mustard seeds in it, so that makes it mustard.
But anyways, getting back on
Wow.
topic, we went from America to mustard seeds.
Well, Americans
It's fine. It's fine.
What-
Americans
It's
are
all-
mustard seeds.
What? What? Well, I mean, Donald Trump is how orangey yellow he is, honestly.
All right, wait.
Yeah, he's just a cheater.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I was really thinking now how difficult it must have been to grow your crops because, there's no pesticide, no compost, no fertilizer. Or they would have figured it out eventually, but your crop yield must be minimal, you know, for that first part of the process.
For the first couple
Well,
years, yeah.
First 100 or so years, definitely.
No,
I would say
it depends on where you're going
if
it, though.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to. I would say it would have taken quite a while.
What, to get used to, like, for it to get used to
No, I mean, there
land?
were no what pesticides were there back then? Like nothing. I
Well,
can't think
there
of
were
one.
some natural things you could do, like obviously
Yeah.
tending to the fields every day
Lavender.
and picking them off.
You could have like your herbal plants that were basic pesticides. I don't think anyone really
I
noticed, but
think-
for those who
I think we kind of
had it.
overestimating. Like, I don't want to say how smart they were, but I mean, let's just think. This is what they knew. We take this thing, okay, we put it in the ground, we put an undefined amount of water on it, and it'll grow. So as soon as you start, you could see, yeah, a bug comes and it's starting to eat the crops. That's bad. But what could they do about it? You know, that would have taken a long time to work out those, I would say, impurities, if you know what I mean. So that's why I say 100 years, maybe even more. But I mean, you know, it takes while it may be easier, obviously nowadays we advancing so quick, but it was so slow back then in terms of experiments.
You have to understand.
and all that.
Yep. You have to understand that these things only really happen in places that are extremely fertile, as we've said multiple times.
Yes,
Fertile Crescent,
yes.
Nile River,
Yeah.
Yellow River in China, you know,
Exactly, yeah.
Norte Chico in South America.
Yeah.
No, it's very unique places. There aren't many.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
like-
that's there would
hence
have
the
been
Africa-
a breeding ground of all these animals that feed off of those. Hey?
But the thing is then it literally is. It depends on where you are, because if you live near the river, then it's like, oh, this plant grows near the river. You can figure that shit out in a day. You know, it's not.
Yes,
gonna be...
but then you figure out, okay, it's near water. So now,
No, but that's if you want to domesticate it, which I guess is what. We're
yeah,
talking
I'm
about.
just saying that the crops would have it would have taken a while for them to actually get the hang of obviously domesticating it. It would have taken quite a while. And I say it would have taken
does
even
take a while.
longer because, you know, you have to deal with these animals, you know. Like, I don't know enough about how they domesticated the crops, but if you think about
It's pretty
how
simple, really.
how would
Um,
they, I mean, how would have they defended against disease? Against, you know, like, I'm talking about crop
Well-
diseases, I'm talking about,
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty simple, really.
insects.
You just through crop rotation, probably, which is basically just
no, I understand.
you realize if you keep growing the same thing, it starts to yield less.
Crop rotation was only invented in the 16th century.
What was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, crop rotation's relatively
It's-
new.
Yeah,
I know
I
about
was
that.
about to say. But
Oh.
I mean, okay, assuming that they, I just don't see how they would have defended against the disease. For example.
I think the thing is they didn't. They just
Exactly.
kinda-
Yeah, they
that's
just
what I'm
a
didn't.
whole
saying.
bunch of them just died off, and they
Yeah.
adjusted to the new yield of plants. You know?
Like-
Exactly.
If you get sick and you're gonna make other people sick, they're just gonna kick you out the settlement. You know, go
Yeah,
survive
well,
on your own.
that's happened for like almost every single disease that we've had so far. Yeah.
But they wouldn't have necessarily. How would they? I mean, we can think of it now because we've got this common sense. We we understand how the basic things of the world work. They
Yeah.
didn't.
The research has been done.
You
Yeah.
know, like I personally think for me, it would have taken me quite a while to realize how to combat a crop disease. I mean, like, if I was in that era, I suddenly see the crop starting to die. I'm like, what's happening? So I go.
Well,
hungry
that's
for
where
that.
religion comes in. They probably thought they were being smitten.
It's
with
a
Yes,
plague.
some-
and then
Yeah.
everything they would have done, you're actually, proving what I'm saying, because then they would have thought of useless ways to combat it. They would have thought of, okay, let me just pray to my God or whatever, and then
Just play
hopefully it
Torah.
survives. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it would have taken more time out of their thinking of how do we combat it. So
And I do have an idea for how they combated some of the vermin.
yes.
Cats and
Oh
dogs.
yeah, that's
you
When
very
were
domesticate-
cats domesticated though? Because I think it was
early.
Pretty early on. Let
Yeah.
me do a quick Google.
I'm also
cat.
checking now. Yeah. No. Okay. Fair enough. Around 9,500 BC. Oh no.
Yeah,
Wait. That's
the earlier
years ago.
ancestors of today's domestic cats spread from Southwest Asia and into Europe as early as 4,400 BC. So it fits.
Yeah.
It fits.
That would have that's quite a while though from crop domestication though, don't you think? That's what I'm talking about though. That they would have figured out. Okay, cats are good for rodents. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm saying that period between, let's just say as an example, between them domesticating crops and domesticating cats, that would have been their agricultural development period.
What I'm gonna say, just quickly on top of what you're saying, is I think that it's like so the domestication of crops wasn't just something that people were like all of a sudden one night they all just woke up and they're like, hey, I can do this. This is gonna
Exactly, yeah.
this is gonna do it developed over a long time of
yeah.
communication and trial and error, and eventually it got to everyone. Today it isn't even with everyone. Let's just be honest,
Yeah.
there's still tribes out there that
on those
that
there's
hunt
an
together.
island tribe that
Which-
yeah.
And there's a good point. There is an alternative to hunter-gathering and agriculture. It's a little good in between, and that's pastoralism. Nomads, keep
Oh,
moving your
yeah.
cattle to grazing land like Mongols.
Yeah,
That's
but then that relies solely on cattle, which is a different type of domestication.
yeah, but it's good in between. You don't need to grow anything.
You see
Yeah.
what I mean though by saying it would have taken a long time even to find that that counter to disease and like fine tuning in essence the
Yeah,
agriculture.
There was definitely a period where so population obviously grew when we found the domestication of agriculture, where we figured we discovered that we can plant
yes.
seeds and something
Of
happens.
course, yeah.
And then there's that period where we realized that plants don't grow everywhere. They don't just grow when you stick them in the ground. There's a lot of things that need to happen before that'll happen.
Agreed.
And then there was the period where
Sunlight,
the plants
yeah.
start dying, or the season changes.
Exactly.
And now
Yeah.
you realize that you can't grow the same plant during different times of the year.
Yes.
And then there's and now
Which-
the period that you guys are speaking about, where the pests are now killing off the plants, and people have to realize that you need to use a deterrent, or you need to have animals to get
Very
them away.
true, yes.
And we become more and more efficient at this, which is why we can grow so many plants.
yeah.
Which leads to us developing things like the calendar, so you can,
Yes,
keep track and time. Record keeping in Sumeria,
Yes,
Sumer,
yeah.
sorry, in Mesopotamia, which leads to writing because you're
And I
record
think-
keeping.
And I think even math to some
And-
degree.
Yeah, then mathematics as well starts becoming a thing, and then we're starting to see society here.
Yeah, all from some shitty plants.
Yeah. literally,
Yeah. How about alcohol? Because that's a thing now.
Ah, yes.
We have alcohol now because we have barley, which we can ferment. And
Fair
That
enough.
was a while, like a
What's-
little while after agriculture. Like that wasn't one of the, but that was. Let's just say that was one of the best reasons for agriculture.
That was one of the best things that happened during the
Yes.
agricultural revolution.
Congratulations, you have discovered crippling
you have
alcoholism.
achieved drunk. I wonder how they figured that out, though. Like how many times must have they, boiled random plants to figure out? Ooh, this one has.
Not even that. I think someone honestly just left an apple out, or a pear, or something weird outside, and it just turned. It fermented. And they
Yeah.
were like, I noticed that I've left this out for this long. It
And it
hasn't gone moldy for some reason, and it tastes pretty nice. I'm not feeling as depressed as I was yesterday.
So let's
So,
do it again.
So let's,
So-
let's try to do this again.
It's just human ingenuity, really, because some
Yeah.
plants do make you drunk if you eat them when they're rotten, like marula fruit. If you eat too
Yep.
many.
Yep.
So this guy, or multiple people through a long period of time, probably discovered, if I eat this rotten thing, it makes me a bit, happy. let's liquefy it, and also it's also a preservative. It's a way to preserve nutrients as well, because beer is liquid bread, and you can keep it for a very long time if you store it.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to protect from harsh times and also foul drinking water.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Is it's a lot cleaner than drinking water, which would be
Well, if the drinking water's foul, then yeah.
yeah. So like people would obviously prefer to drink something that isn't going to give them dysentery and they're going to their lungs out.
Yeah.
So what they do is they drink fermented, liquids instead, and fermented fruit instead, and that is obviously a lot safer. So therefore, population can grow, and what happened before, what we were speaking about before, just happens again.
Yeah.
So everybody who's old enough, go to your drinks cabinet and thank your beer
You'll be
for
like, thank
helping
you, agriculture,
humanity.
thank you.
That beer
See.
would not be in your drawer today if it wasn't for some bloke just figuring it out. Actually, you probably wouldn't be here today. Let's just be honest.
No, probably not. Like with the population, probably
Yeah.
not.
So thank your
I mean,
beer.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Thank it a
Thank-
lot
just
because it did
kiss it.
something.
Drink it, ingest it.
Yeah, stop staring at it. Just have a swig. Okay, unless you're crippling alcoholic, I think we should have a disclaimer.
Yeah,
Do not
okay,
drop
yeah.
my- Okay, I really want to go on to like the alien foods that were discovered in America, like after colonialism, since we're speaking about agriculture. And I know it isn't like for the time period, but that is so cool. Dude, I just want you to all think of a scenario here, okay? You've been eating, it's been, I don't know how long, give me a time scale of the time before we colonized, or we discovered America. For 2,500 years, 4,500 years, we had the same food. We were eating the same stuff for that long. We didn't know that there could be any different flavors, much like you don't know that there can be anything really new out there.
No,
you
very
don't
true,
expect any
yes,
new
yeah.
flavors, okay? And now all
Yeah.
of a sudden, they start importing this thing called coffee or tomatoes
Spices.
or these spices.
Yes.
What else?
Salt, pepper.
Chocolate, salt, pepper, all that
Cocoa,
stuff.
you mean.
And now it's completely different. It's completely brand new. There's new food, and your palate is going crazy.
I think salt was the biggest one of that, honestly. Like, salt
Yeah.
was just spice trade, going back to that, silk trade,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, spice route.
So, for a comprehensive list, if you lived in Western Europe before, discovering, spices and other foods in the Americas, your diet consisted mostly of wheat, lentils, sorrel, basil. You did not have carrots.
Very
Carrots was a
bland.
thing.
Carrots
Horseradish.
were probably the best thing. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And back then they weren't orange, and they weren't that long either. The Dutch were the ones who made it orange. But
Thus orange, yeah.
Don't you think it's interesting? Think about this, guys. Just a quick thought, sidetrack thought. How the world went from a lot of meat and berries, I don't want to say purely meat, but like a big chunk meat. Went from like meat and berries, okay, to a complete reverse around, in the medieval times of like peasants just feeding off of crops and barely like getting that high quality,
That
that
was even
good
dark
meat.
ages. That can go way back.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly.
No, it's actually long before, because it's actually at the agricultural revolution where we change to carbs.
No, but the thing is, you can
But
have
it like
veganism
completely
today.
inverted. Yeah, it completely inverted.
You don't need to eat meat today to live. If you know what you're doing,
Yeah.
you do not need to eat meat. I mean, I don't really, I like my bacon, but and I really shouldn't
Oink
say
oink.
that because there's certain grandparents that wouldn't agree with me. But I do like my bacon, and I will continue to eat my bacon. But you can live off of just plants, and I think back then, but before the agricultural revolution, that was impossible. If you only ate plants,
A lot harder. I feel like if you're in the Fertile Crescent, you could have lived off all of that abundant.
I don't know. I don't think there's enough variety. You need nuts, and you need
Yeah, but
you need vitamin C and all that.
You
and
need nuts,
B12.
bro.
I don't know. I feel like it could happen, but it was so unlikely. It's like, just no, like I still think it could have happened. Just like there are people who.
I mean, then again, they
don't
didn't
know.
live very long, so.
Mhm.
No, yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Life expectancy jumped up after agriculture. Like,
Yeah.
although yes, you are, your bones become more like you more. I don't want to say unfit, but like, you more you're getting that balance, that nice balance of meat and agriculture and calories.
Only
And
the
less strenuous, less dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Everything just life expectancy went up.
only
Yeah.
the really rich people and the upper class would eat meat on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also
But I mean, I'm talking about now back in like agricultural times. I like went straight back.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's just another thing that, and obviously, the longer you live, the more you can invent. The more you invent,
Yeah.
the
The more
easier
you can
life
do, the
is.
more
Yeah,
knowledge you can pass on. Yep.
Mhm.
exactly.
And that brings us to writing, which gets
a little
invented around.
snowball effect. Yeah,
At
I
the-
mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
At the end of
Okay.
this timeline in the agricultural part, we've got Sumer, really. Yeah, no, Mesopotamia. Which is and Uruk and those lovely city-states. Great city-states. The best.
Okay. Well, last thoughts. Last thoughts about it. Last thoughts.
We have, well, right now, at the end of this timeline, we are currently, obviously farming. We've got animals thrown into the mix to help us with the plowing and fertilization and all of those lovely inventions.
Wonderful things.
Wonderful things. We have alcohol now, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
We have more specialized tasks going on. We're starting to see laws coming into place, such as the Code of Hammurabi in Babylon. We are starting to see, writing systems such as the cuneiform script, which is made out of wedges slammed into clay, and other tablets. We're seeing record-keeping, administration, stratified class systems. You've got the king at the top, his advisors, the nobles, soldiers. We're starting to see more organization. Empires are starting to form, such as Sargon of Akkad, making the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia. And now
Yeah.
we're on the cusp of the Bronze Age, which is a really cool period because it brings with it, Egypt.
Really cool stuff.
No, like Egypt, the Hittites, the beta version of the
Yeah.
Greeks known as the Mycenaeans, which is
I
always
mean,
a good thing.
honestly, like, and it's all as much as you could say. I mean, about everything. Oh, it's pivotal to history, but I honestly think that like it's the agricultural is equal, if not more important than the discovery of fire. Fire was incredible discovery, and I would say that agriculture is equally as important. It just paved the way for so many things. It's definitely one of the most, how do you say, most key, the keyest,
Pivotal.
one of the pivotal parts in human history that's paved the way for everything we have today.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Bronze Age, eh?
Yeah, Bronze Age. That's gonna come next, and bronze is interesting. 'Cause
An age.
Yeah, it's interesting because it has a whole age named after it, and
Yeah.
also we're starting to move away from sad lumpy metal and rocks to farm things and weird metal. We're starting to see a standardized quality of metal made through
Real tools.
combining copper with tin that gives you bronze.
Yes,
And
mining.
tin,
Yeah.
and tin isn't found in these areas we're talking about. It. I don't know where my dealer tells me. You get it. I don't know where you find tin. Some say Western Europe, like England and
I
France.
think it's in Europe, yes.
Yeah.
Must
and
be
that-
Europe. I think it's very in the Baltic region.
Yeah, that too. And it
A lot there.
filtered its way down through trade to these beautiful, new agricultural
Yeah.
empires forming.
I
The
think
horse,
tin also in the middle of Africa. I don't know. Okay, sorry, carry
the
on.
horse has been domesticated at the end of this timeline by Indo-Europeans who have filtered their way down towards the Hittite Empire.
Via agriculture.
via agriculture and trade,
Via
and
agriculture.
and this brings us the chariot, and that's
Via agriculture.
yes.
All could have not been done without them
I mean-
horses and carrots.
You take a plow, you put a platform on it, you replace the oxen with cattle, and you put a little sheet around it so you can hold on, and there you go, you got a chariot. Now you can go at 20 miles per hour.
Now I can go cut off people's heads. Wait, too far?
Yes, you can.
No, you can.
No.
And that's what we're going to be speaking about next episode.
Me
Is,
Alright.
cutting off people's
Next
heads.
episode, we're going to talk about the very first recorded battle in history, the Battle of Kadesh, between the Hittite Empire and the Egyptians.
And,
And,
what about the travel of the Sahara with camels, etc.?
That's not yet. That's with the Arabs.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's still a little bit down the line.
Yeah, a little bit
I
down.
don't know when camels were domesticated, but
Well,
you know.
they were now, I think, but
They were about the same time as horses, I think, because they kind of look the same.
They look the same, therefore they are.
Exactly.
and the Malian Empire hasn't formed yet, so there's no reason to cross the Sahara yet to get something.
Yes.
There's nothing to get yet. There's no
Yes.
resources that you can access quite yet, and it is Africa. We spoke about it before.
There's just
There's
sand.
not much there. That's nice.
So much sand, you
That's
can fit the entire
sand.
continental US in the Sahara Desert. It's just sand.
When did you say? When was that empire formed that really started trade between Africa and Eastern?
Malian Empire was the big one that had Mansa Musa. That's in the Middle Ages. That's between the 1230 and 1670. And preceded by the Ghanaian Empire, which was relatively wealthy, which is 500 AD to 1200. So, not yet.
Really?
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know. I had a source here on my thing that there were traces of cattle keeping in northern Eastern Africa,
Mhm.
and the Nubian wild ass was domesticated between the 5th and the 4th millennia BC.
Yeah, but Nubia is not in West Africa. Nubia is just below Egypt, and the Egyptians had many
Nubian, it was a
Yeah.
animal, the Nubian
It-
wild
yeah.
It's like Sudan, isn't it?
Yeah, Nubia is
Ah.
like near Sudan, Khartoum, places like that.
Yeah. Anyways, sorry, carry on. But that's all Bronze Age stuff, am I right, boys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
boys.
Okay.
All right.
We should probably start wrapping up.
All right.
It's almost at an hour.
Yeah, my recording's almost there.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. I am Raymond. This is my co-host Cleve, and our guest today, Josh. Next
Thank you for
episode.
having
I didn't even
me,
get to say
yes,
anything.
thank you,
Next-
thank you. Oh,
Okay.
you could have been like, thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks for coming, guys. Say
Thanks for having me.
you are welcome.
Josh, do you want to plug anything? Since I know you have Twitch and YouTube.
You know my plug already, Network Gremlin. Come watch the stream. Thanks
Yeah,
for
excellent.
allowing me on. If you guys want more of me, leave a thumbs up. If it hits over 10 likes, I'll come back with like colonialism.